I think this is, we should start the meeting. It's now 10:03. So let's go. I want to thank everyone for agreeing to participate in this meeting, and also thank all of you to continue your flexibility in using this virtual format. We're almost getting used to it now. Dear colleagues and excellencies, I would like to welcome you to this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to hear reports from the chairs of the Peace Building Commission country configuration on recent developments and planned activities in their countries of engagement. While this is billed as a quarterly meeting, I should note that we missed the last quarterly briefing in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the first meeting of this nature since Canada assumed the chairmanship of the PBC. It has been a busy few months in the PBC though, and in the countries where we engage, including elections and transfers of powers, and of course, the impact of COVID-19. I started to do it in the last meeting, but before we start, I want to pay a special tribute. Now it's true, it's your last meeting, Jörg. Last week I thought it could have been, but not that I want to send you back to Switzerland more quickly. I would love to keep you with us, but I just want to pay tribute to you. I think you are an exceptional diplomat. You've done great things, whether it's working on the compact of migration, and that was an Herculean task for you, and then working on your countries, on Burundi within the PBC, and you've been resilient, determined, strategic, and really a very efficient chair of the peace building configuration for Burundi. And you were able to actually be respected by all sides. And really, you were tireless in your efforts to actually do your best for a very, very tough country and an environment that was not easy. So I just want to say thank you. We're all gonna miss you. You're going to Geneva. There are worse places to go in the world, but we all want to visit you. We know that everybody has told me about your house there, so we're all gonna come and appear. But I just want to wish you all of the very best and thank you for everything you've done. And really, I'm sad to see you leave because I count you as one of my best friends in New York, and I thank you for everything. So the agenda for today will be as follows. We will hear briefings from Brazil, Morocco, Sweden, and Switzerland. And after that, I'll have a few words on Sierra Leone. And after that, following the briefings by each of the chair, I will give the floor to Oscar before opening the floor to the Peace Building Commission members. So I remind you that as this would normally be webcast as an open meeting of the Peace Building Commission, we will be recording the meeting and posting the video on the PBSO website for interested observers. I also remind all participants to sign in with their name and mission affiliation, and to keep your microphone on mute if you're not, given the floor. So now I will give the floor to the briefers of the country-specific configuration, and I will start with my good friend Ronaldo, who is the permanent representative of Brazil, as we all know, and the chair of the Guinea-Bissau configuration. Ronaldo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marc-André. Although you humiliate us by your background, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to brief the members of the PBC on the recent activities of the Guinea-Bissau country-specific configuration. Let me just say at the outset that I don't think there is any format or any situation where we can say with great ease that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Then the country-specific configurations Nonetheless, I think it's useful, and we all have, I think, lessons to learn and experiences to gain by hearing our colleagues and their configurations, what's going on. So I think it's a very useful exercise. Now, Guinea-Bissau continues to face a very challenging juncture in its path to consolidating democracy. In spite of the completion of the electoral cycle, there is persistent political instability in the country. Last February, the configuration held a meeting to assess developments on the ground following the second round of the presidential elections held on 29 December 2019. During the meeting, the members of the PBC expressed their concern with the difficulties found by the local institutions to reach a consensus on the winner of the presidential election. Candidate Domingos Simões Pereira from the PAIGC did not recognize the winner declared by the National Electoral Commission, Umaru Sissoko Embalo, and filed a complaint with the Supreme Court. During the meeting, the members of the PBC called upon the political actors to solve their differences through dialogue and to show restraint. They also underlined that political stability will be instrumental to foster peace-building activities and internal reforms in Guinea-Bissau. The PBC also commended the role played by UNIOGBIS and the organizations of the so-called P5 group, which are the UN, CPLP, ECOWAS, the African Union, and the EU, in exercising good offices and facilitating inclusive political dialogue. On the other hand, in the context of the mandated reconfiguration of UNIOGBIS, PBC reiterated its willingness to continue working to ensure system-wide coherence between UNIOGBIS, the country team, and all relevant international and regional actors. During this meeting in February, the configuration also adopted a written advice to the Security Council, drawing attention to some aspects that could be considered during the negotiations on UNIOGBIS's mandate renewal. This was, in my view, one more tangible example of the PBC's ability to provide specific, strategic, and targeted advice to the Security Council. Many of the suggestions were, in one way or another, reflected in the adopted resolution. We understand that this contributed to ensure a longer-term perspective required for sustaining peace in Guinea-Bissau. In this advice, the PBC also reiterated its commitment to support UNIOGBIS and the UN country team during the transition. It highlighted the need to ensure an optimal reconfigured UN presence based on national peace-building priorities. Likewise, it underscored the importance at this critical time of political transition that the UNIOGBIS continue to have a strong mandate to exercise good offices and to facilitate inclusive political dialogue and national reconciliation, supported by UNOWAS, which will assume the good offices and preventive role following UNIOGBIS's withdrawal at the end of this year. The PBC also reaffirmed its willingness to serve as a platform for coherence between, coherence between all relevant international and regional actors. The past months have brought about new challenges. In May, we circulated a written update on the recent developments on the ground, prepared by the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. The election of Umaru Sissoko Embalo has been recognized by ECOWAS last April. However, political tensions persist, hampering the appointment of a new prime minister in accordance with the country's constitution. The COVID-19 pandemic has also negatively affected the fragile health system in Guinea-Bissau, and the latest numbers we have are of almost 1,500 cases and 15 deaths as of June 17th. The configuration will hold its next meeting tomorrow, June 24th, and this will offer us an opportunity to discuss the current situation and to update all members on the main challenges ahead. Let me also underscore that last Friday I had a virtual meeting with representatives of the World Bank in order to discuss their activities in Guinea-Bissau. I was informed then that they are helping the country to face COVID-19 pandemic and have also maintained their engagement in socio-economic activities. I will present the main takeaways of this discussion tomorrow during the configurations meeting, hoping that the PBC members can actively participate and engage in our debates. Those are the main activities of the Guinea-Bissau country-specific configuration that I would like to draw your attention to today. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Ronaldo, for this briefing, and thanks for the intensity of the. Thanks for the intensity of the activities and the configuration. So thank you very much for your leadership. So now I'll give the floor to the permanent representative of Morocco, our good friend Omar, Ambassador Ilale, as chair of the Central African Republic. Omar, vous avez la parole.
Seems she's not there.
Omar, are you there? You were there just a few moments ago. Do we see him? No?
He seems to have stepped away from his
okay, so we'll just, why don't we go to Anna Karen? I see you there. So as the chair of the of Liberia, of the configuration of Liberia, Anna Karen, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Marc-André, and just to my dear friend Jürgen, we'll miss you a lot in this context, but also in other contexts, and I wish you all the best for Geneva and look forward to seeing you there. Well, thank you so much, Marc-André, for convening this meeting, and to my colleagues for updating us on the ongoing work in the various PBC country configurations. I will give you an update on the latest activities in the Liberia configuration. We understand that the President of Liberia extended a state of emergency over the COVID-19 pandemic, citing an exponential increase in number of cases. According to the WHO, as of 22nd June, there have been 626 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 34 deaths since mid-March. Following the first PBC meeting held as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic on 8 April, the configuration held the first virtual country-specific meeting at ambassadorial level on 15 April. The meeting focused on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in Liberia and underlined the value of coherent, multidimensional, and community-based response. We received updates from representatives of the government of Liberia on the national COVID-19 response, as well as the World Bank on its support and the resident coordinators on the UN response in support of the government. It was clear during the discussion that the pandemic will have far-reaching consequences in Liberia, which was already struggling with a difficult economic situation before the outbreak. The importance of utilizing the convening role of the PBC to bring together relevant actors, including women's organizations and civil society, to further coordination, strengthen partnership, and mobilize resources was highlighted. Following the meeting in April, I have conducted a virtual visit to Liberia and Monrovia instead of my planned visit that I hoped to make in May. I have conducted bilateral meetings with government representatives, including with the Minister of Internal Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Finance, Gender, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, as well as National Coordinator, Madame Mary Broad. Tomorrow, supported by the Resident Coordinator's Office, I will meet with Liberian civil society organizations virtually to hear their views of the impact and challenges for their work in the current situation and how the PBC could be of assistance in bringing attention to this. While the pandemic has brought many constraints on our work, the ability to meet virtually has enabled me to ensure that we are being inclusive and feeding a broad set of voices into our peace-building discussions. Some of my conclusions from the discussions with government representatives have been that clearly the impact of COVID-19 will have far broader consequences in Liberia than effects related to health aspects, as in so many other countries. The fragility that was already present in Liberia risks to be exacerbated by the crisis, including, for example, the inequalities and the difficult situation for women, the high number of youth under unemployment, issues related to land rights, and the overall challenging economic situation. In May, I also conducted a virtual visit to Washington, D.C. instead of my planned visit for April. I had meetings with both the World Bank and the IMF. We have previously shared a written summary for these meetings with you, but I'll give you a few highlights from the discussions. In the COVID-19 response, the IMF had in April approved debt relief for Liberia and has, since our meeting, agreed on a budget support through the Rapid Credit Facility. The IMF has also been working closely with the United Nations World Food Programme and the World Bank in order to help the government produce, procure and distribute emergency food aid, as a large share of budget support was going to be used for this purpose. The World Bank is assisting Liberia in dealing with the health crisis, building on the country's experience in responding to the Ebola crisis, while simultaneously helping the country respond to the economic challenges. Bank action has so far included promoting social protection with cash transfer programs and strengthening safety nets, reducing food insecurity, supporting the private sector to minimize job losses, and supporting the government to continue its operation, including through budget support. The importance of transparency, good governance, and accountability were key issues raised in these discussions. And I also raised this issue with the Minister of Finance in Monrovia. And these are areas in which I feel the Commission is playing a role in conveying important messages. I know that these are also peace-building priorities for Liberia. Both the IMF and the World Bank recognize the benefits of further strengthening the partnership with the PBC. The bank particularly highlighted the important message on the need for inclusivity that have been conveyed during the recent PBC meeting, 15 April. I have been very encouraged by the continued high level of engagement from the government of Liberia to the meetings convened in the PBC, demonstrating national ownership, which we all know is a crucial element in the ongoing efforts to continue to build and sustain peace in the country. We are also bearing in mind the importance of ensuring the inclusion of women in all these discussions and look forward to updates from the various women-led civil society organizations throughout the year. The importance of including the perspective of and the situation for young people is also a continuous part of our work. Going forward, the Liberia Confederation will convene a meeting of expert level in mid-July, during which an update will be provided on the UN response to COVID-19 in support of Liberia, as well as on the national response. Later on in the year, we are planning for an ambassadorial level meeting to follow up on the discussions held during the spring and summer, and also connecting it to the upcoming senatorial elections. To conclude, I'd like to reaffirm that I will continue to follow the development in Liberia closely. As I've stated before, there are fragilities and root causes of conflict that remain to be addressed and which risk being exacerbated by the ongoing pandemic. It is therefore important to sustain international attention to the developments in Liberia. At the same time, COVID-19 presents opportunity to increase social cohesion and trust in government through conflict-sensitive, inclusive, and people-centered responses and recovery plans. We can build back better. Lastly, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to our colleagues at the Liberian mission here in New York, including my colleague T.R. Kemaya, for the continued excellent cooperation, as well as to Oscar and the team at the PBSO for the critical support and collaboration, and of course also to my own expert, Matilda Holmer, for her support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna Karen. Thanks for your engagement and the programs you've set out. I now go back to Omar. Omar, I think, comme président de la configuration de la République centrafricaine. Merci, Omar.
Merci, cher Marc-André. Je suis désolé, j'étais en communication téléphonique avec ma capitale.
Aucun problème.
Merci beaucoup. I would like, first of all, to thank you, dear Marc-André, for convening this meeting and for your continuous engagement at the realm of our commission, in particular during the this challenging time. Our collective efforts show the importance of PBC, particularly in times of crisis. All the country configurations remained engaged, and you, Mr. Chair, organized a series of important meetings that all allowed us to remain informed and engaged in support of all countries and regions on the agenda of the Commission. Regional meetings on the Sahel and on the Central African region in particular were very helpful to exchange on the regional impact of the pandemic, to share successful experiences and to discuss the different ways and means to overcome it. My intervention today will be focused on the three following points: the general situation in the CAR, the ambassadorial meeting held on May 7th, and the preparation for the upcoming renewal of MINUSCA's mandate. First of all, the Central African Republic was so far relatively spared by the COVID-19. However, despite the early measures taken by the authorities at the beginning of the outbreak and the strong support provided by MINUSCA, cases are rising dangerously, mostly due to the lack of medical facilities and difficulties in enforcing social distancing. Several members of the government are infected, which will have an impact on the capacity of the national authorities to carry out their engagement. I take this opportunity to congratulate the government, MINUSCA, and all other partners of the CAR for their tireless efforts in combating this unprecedented pandemic. Stakes are high as the pandemic threatens to reverse peace-building gains achieved the past years, particularly in terms of security and on the socio-economic front. Despite the pandemic, the political parties are actively preparing the next electoral process. On one side, we have the MCU, the party of President Touadéra, which recently signed an agreement with 44 political parties, creating the platform Être Ensemble. On the other hand, the coalition of the opposition is composed of 16 political parties that are currently in the opposition. There are also some political personalities that might run for the presidential election without necessarily the support of the two previous platforms. We will continue to monitor the evolution of the situation, mainly to promote a code of conduct for all candidates, as it was the case for previous elections. It is indeed crucial that the upcoming elections are not used to destabilize the country. The CAR configuration remains engaged in these difficult times to support the national authorities and MINUSCA, as well as bilateral and multilateral partners of the CAR in their actions to limit the impact of pandemic. In this regard, Morocco has been also active in the Fifth Committee to ensure minimal impacts on the budget of MINUSCA. It was indeed important to limit the reduction of the budget as much as possible, given the current situation in the country, between the elections, the implementation of the peace agreement, and of course, the impacts of the COVID-19. To our last ambassadorial meeting held on the 7th of May, comprehensive briefings were presented to the members of the configuration from the government with His Excellency Agustin Yonga Yahot, Minister of Territorial Administration and Decentralization, the UN with SRSG Mankeur Ndiaye and ASG Bintou Keita, and from Mr. Han Freitas, World Bank Country Manager. The briefings focus on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, on the electoral process, on the implementation of the peace agreement, as well as on its impact on the economy. Various forms of financial support to the government were announced by the members of the configuration. Members also stressed the need to carry out the implementation of the peace agreement as well as the electoral preparatory process. They also reiterate the need for all actors to adhere to the Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire. Third, last point, as per usual practice, the configuration will closely engage with the Security Council for the renewal of the MINUSCA's mandate in November. Period that will be crucial for the future of the country, in particular with the election and the implementation of the peace process. The objective is to submit to the Security Council a written contribution, providing elements from peace-building perspective to the members of the Council ahead of the mandate renewal. To this end, we will focus our attention on three main elements: the preparatory process for the upcoming election, the rule of law and the socio-economic situation of the country, and in particular, the implementation of RCPC. We are planning to organize 3 expert-level meetings in the coming weeks as preparatory step to ambassadorial meetings. Our first expert-level meeting will be held the 10th of July on the electoral process. I remain at your disposal if there is any question or comments. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Merci beaucoup, Omar, pour ton engagement et l'engagement du Maroc. Thank you. I want now to give the floor for, well, a very sad moment. So, Jörg, we're all sad, but actually, you're going out with quite an interesting situation. So, so please, we're looking forward to your final report, and we thank you for everything you've done. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Marc-André, really thank you very much also for your kind words. Much too generous, especially in the circle I'm looking through the screen who is here. Very, very distinguished colleagues and diplomats. So thank you very, very much to all of you. Indeed, in the few weeks since my last written report of 11 May to the members of the Burundi configuration, the people of Burundi have gone through a particularly eventful time. Let me just recall some key moments. On 20 May, Burundi held its parliamentary and presidential elections. Only a few days later, on 8 June, the world learned about the passing of President Pierre Nkurunziza. On 18 June, the newly elected president, His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye, was inaugurated. And not later than today, the National Assembly approved the appointment of the Prime Minister and the Vice President of the Republic. And of course, during all this time, like any other country around the world, Burundi felt the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, not least on its socio-economic development. As the people of Burundi and their new government are about to chart their way into the future, it is clear that they will continue to need the cooperation of their international and regional partners in order to pursue their path towards sustained peace and prosperity. Now, as Marc-André mentioned, later this week, I will finally, it's been around, complete my tour as Switzerland's permanent representative to the United Nations here in New York, and of course also as chair of the Burundi configuration of the PBC. So with your indulgence, allow me to take this opportunity and to share a few personal reflections after almost 5 years in this particular capacity. I undertook a total of 10 missions to Burundi, including an introductory mission in December 2014 with the then chair of the configuration, my predecessor, Ambassador Paul Seeger. Some of you may remember, I see Oscar, I think you remember very well, that we witnessed in December 2014 actually the closing of the United Nations office in Burundi, the famous BNUB, the Bureau des Nations Unies Burundi. Several of these missions were extended by meetings in capitals in the region, including several stopovers in Addis Abeba and meetings at the African Union headquarters. In addition to these missions, there were, of course, the regular formal meetings of the configuration here in New York, several briefings to the Security Council, but also, and maybe very important besides all these formal meetings, innumerable informal exchanges with member states, UN Secretariat, the World Bank, IMF, representatives of regional and sub-regional organizations, civil society, and many other interested parties. My tenure as chair of the Burundi configuration coincided more or less with the time between the 2015 and the 2020 elections. And colleagues, it is no secret that this period was at times challenging for Burundi and its people, as well as for the relations between Burundi and some of its international partners. Nevertheless, and thanks to the support and close cooperation with the government of Burundi, and also the support of many partners, I believe that the configuration was able, time and again, to seize opportunities to advance Burundi's peace-building agenda. The configuration kept communications open with the highest level of the government at all times. We met with a large variety of stakeholders in Burundi, including the political opposition, religious leaders, civil society, and the private sector, and we integrated their perspectives into the discussions and activities of the PBC. The configuration kept Burundi on the agenda in New York, as we provided regular reports from the field on developments in the country and offered a space for discussion among member states, with Burundi always being part of these discussions. The configuration reached out to partners in New York and beyond with concrete proposals on how to engage and support Burundi. We focused on socio-economic development, in particular agriculture, health, and education, always conscious, though, that successful peace building requires progress in all three pillars: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. The configuration promoted specific projects in key areas, such as strengthening the resilience of the population, for instance, in the field of malnutrition, drawing the attention of donors to the needs identified in subsequent humanitarian response plans and refugee repatriation and reintegration plans, sponsoring community-level conflict mediation and prevention. I, in several meetings, talked about the example of the Femmes Mediatrices, the women mediators. We were supporting African Union human rights observers, and we were assisting the sub-regional mediation process led by President Museveni of Uganda and facilitated by former President Mkapa of Tanzania. However, it's of course never enough. In fact, as we all know, in every society, every country, sustaining peace is a continuous, never-ending task, which is why the work really doesn't stop here. During my missions to Burundi, I had many opportunities to meet with important political stakeholders, including the newly inaugurated president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, long before he was actually inaugurated. During my most recent trip in February of this year, key stakeholders again showed a strong interest in the future cooperation with Burundi's international partners and specifically in the work of the PBC. We also discussed how important it will be to develop step by step the cooperation between Burundi and its partners during the first month following the inauguration of the new government. I am convinced that the Peacebuilding Commission, with its various instruments, including the Support Office, the Support Fund, and the county configuration, can play a critical role in accompanying Burundi as the new government takes office. I'm also convinced that continuing the close cooperation with the resident coordinator and the country team in Bujumbura will be extremely beneficial to any PBC effort. At this particular juncture, it might be a good idea to do again what we did in November 2016, when the then resident coordinator and I, in close cooperation with the PBSO, brought together Burundi's multilateral partners for what we then called a socio-economic consultation in Geneva. It might be a good idea to have an in-depth exchange between the government and its partners about the next steps on the peace-building roadmap and about the most urgent socio-economic needs, including with regard to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that my successor stands ready to pick up the work as chair of the Burundi configuration of the PBC, and that she will continue to enjoy the full support of the Swiss government in this role. Colleagues, like any other member state, Burundi is unique due to its particular history and its present-day political and socio-economic condition. And yet, the PBC Burundi configuration, I believe, offers a number of experiences that may be useful to other countries and to peace building as a whole. Let me just mention a few. I come away from my mandate more convinced than ever that peace building is the right concept for countries that seek to rebuild their societies and institutions, for countries that need to identify or pursue a path towards sustained peace and prosperity. Peace building requires patience and perseverance on the side of the countries who find themselves in the process, but also, at least equally important, on the side of their partners. Peace building requires listening to each other. Ultimately, the governments and people of the countries concerned need to decide what's best for them, and they need to be listened to the most. Meanwhile, they also may want to listen to their regional and international partners because there is a lot of valuable expertise and a lot of goodwill out there. PBC country-specific configurations, I'm not sure whether my colleagues share my experience, but at least in my experience, they are just a tiny wheel in the wider machine of national, regional, and international actors. In fact, more often than not, the configuration does its best work when it isn't even trying to be a wheel, but when it provides the grease that helps the actual wheels to interlock and turn and make the machinery work to the benefit of the country concerned. Bearing this in mind, country-specific configurations can be a very useful item in the PBC toolbox because they have the capacity and the flexibility to tailor peace-building approaches to the specific circumstances and requirements of the particular country. Because the concerned country is an equal partner at any time, which gives the configuration special credibility as an actor from within the UN system. Because the members of the configuration are a group of friends. And while friends do not always agree, they are united in their goodwill towards the country concerned and can be counted on. And because country configurations don't compete with other institutions for influence or resources, and are therefore ideally placed to build bridges between the concerned country and those institutions, as well as between the institutions themselves. So, sorry for being a bit long. I'm coming to the final words, and these are words of thanks. As I mentioned earlier, it has been a true privilege and a pleasure to share this space with all of you during these years, and I want to say a few special thanks. First of all, to our president, the chair, Marc-André and Team Canada, as well as his predecessors for their support, but also for their excellent work that was instrumental in rising the PBC profile and impact within the UN system over the last years. I want to thank ASG Oscar Fernandez Taranco, but also his deputy, Barry Freeman, and the whole PBSO and PBF team in New York. And special thanks go to Vincent Kajuka, who early on accompanied me on all the trips. I couldn't have done it without Vincent, always telling me how to read situations and how to better behave in meetings, but also his successor, Rebecca Feely, who accompanied on the last trips. I'm not sure whether Albert Shingiro is here with us this morning, but very special thanks, of course, to Albert Shingiro and his team in New York, and through him to the government of Burundi for their continued trust and cooperation over all these years. I also want to thank two exceptional resident coordinators, First Paulo Lembo, who was there in the beginning of my mandate, and then Gary Conil, whom I had the privilege of working with. And through them, especially through Gary now, all the members of the UN country team for their dedication and efforts. I've always felt it tremendously impressive to see what they're doing on the ground. I want to thank my colleagues of the Swiss Development Corporation in Burundi, who always respected the distinct character of my role as configuration chair, but still provided invaluable support during each of my missions. And I want to thank, of course, my team here, in particular Andrea Baumann, who's here today, and her predecessor, Tobias Privitelli, who many of you still remember. Obviously, there are many, many more individuals in Burundi, in the region, and here in New York, who gave me crucial advice and support, and without whom I would not have been able to achieve anything, if at all, as chair of the Burundi configuration. So yes, Marc-André, it's a sad moment. I got very attached to Burundi. Burundi and the people as a place is a beautiful place, the people you get easily attached to. I'm sad to leave, but I also feel I learned a lot over these 5 years. I'm extremely grateful for having had this opportunity. Thank you all. And as Marc-André said, there is a beautiful residence in Geneva. The garden has place for everybody. Their house is a little smaller, but please come by, step by, say hello. And I look forward to seeing all of you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jörg. Really, it's a very your remarks will be even helpful in the peace building architecture review that we're doing now, actually. So thank you for saying them, and because you show that the value as well of the peace building your comments on the role of the peace building, the configuration, were very interesting to me as being the oil and not necessarily a wheel, and also the results in Burundi have shown that you're presenting the peace building, your configuration and yourself as a person who could have dialogues with everyone was also very useful and very valuable, and part of the best practices that we can have as a peace building. So congratulations, and also it is yes, you had a team, and yes, you represent a phenomenal country, and but this is a place where also exceptional diplomats can make a real difference, and you've made a personal real difference, and you should put that in the column of your really big achievements. And so thank you very much for that. So allow me just to say a few words about the Sierra Leone situation. It's a very simple one. It's a happy one in many ways. You know that the government of Sierra Leone last year expressed at the end of last year expressed that it was ready to exit from the formal agenda of the Peace Building Commission. And that message was also conveyed during the Peace Building Commission visit to the Mano River Union later in 2019. And we also that Canada was had the privilege of chairing the Sierra Leone configuration for 10 years, and that also we were obviously we were welcoming the decision by the government of Sierra Leone to exit from the formal agenda. But and also at the same time, we applaud the dedication of the government and people of Sierra Leone to ensure durable and lasting peace. And going through many shocks, the political tensions, the economic shocks, the Ebola epidemic, the environmental disasters, and now COVID-19. And the work of addressing the root causes of conflict and laying the foundations for inclusive economic growth and development and building social cohesion is underway, obviously, but will remain a work in progress for many years to come. So the Peace Building Commission door will always be open for Sierra Leone as a platform to share information on progress, and share also information on challenges and priorities for peace building, and partially on a region in a regional context. And I think that the commitment of Sierra Leone to actually make sure that the world looks at the situation as more from a regional perspective is very, very good and essential and very promising in some way. So we're planning to organize a meeting next month to formally mark the occasion, because we haven't done it since the end of the year, and for obvious reasons. And so we will work with Ali and his team and the team in Sierra Leone to focus on, whether the progress in implementing the country's medium-term national development plan in the context of the challenge posed by COVID-19. The discussion will be around that, and then that will be an occasion to share with everyone and try to draw the international attention also to some of the challenges of the country and of the regions. And we've done a lot of that in the recent discussions on COVID-19 within the Peacebuilding Commission. We want to continue this work, and that's basically the occasion we're going to take to celebrate the situation in Sierra Leone in many ways. So we will make the formal thank you and all of that during that session. But I just want to say that I want to thank Ali and his team and his predecessors for the many years of collaboration with us. And so that is a very good story, but it's also a good story because it's a country that wants to remain engaged with the Peacebuilding Commission and sees the value. And I think it's a transformative for us as well at this time to actually change the nature of the role of the Peacebuilding Commission with respect to Sierra Leone and the region, the Manu River region. So this is what I had to say on Sierra Leone, I will now give the floor to Oscar before I give the floor to each and every one of you, if you want. And Oscar, you have the floor.
Thank you, thank you very much, Marc-André, and good morning to all colleagues, friends, members of the Peacebuilding Commission. First, let me thank you, Mr. Chair, for actually convening this meeting, which gives us, again, this unique opportunity to hear from each of the chairs of the country configurations, which is one of the multiple flexible working methods of the Peacebuilding Commission, and to hear how the work in these commissions actually complement the work plan of the Peacebuilding Commission that we have charted forward for this year. And to thank you, Chair, and to thank all the configuration chairs and all the colleagues for the tremendous efforts that we have seen over the past 4 months. I think it's thanks to their commitment, to your commitment, to the collective efforts of the Peacebuilding Commission that it has actually risen to the occasion and has managed to be one of the most actively engaged UN intergovernmental bodies during this COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly, the PBC has not been missing in action. If anything, we have been really providing quite a lot of support as a result of the collective leadership that we just heard from and beyond. As we've seen, even despite the constraints and the limitations, including the big challenge of not having interpretation. And we thank the many ambassadors who have been briefing in English, this not being the language of usual reference for them, that despite this, the Commission has never stopped fulfilling its core mandate. And again, thanks to these flexible working methods that we have and that are soon going to be reflected in the observations of the independent eminent persons group who are just completing their letter to the Secretary General, and they will be issuing quite a lot of very pointed and insightful remarks, takeaways, takeaways from their conversation actually that they had with the configuration chairs, and in particular with Ambassador Jörg Lober, who has really inspired them to think how certain configurations have really been doing an exemplary work, reinventing working methods, going way beyond the usual confines of the way that some of these configurations tended to work in the past. I think important because in this time and age, this flexibility has allowed more countries to be discussed in the configuration, more regions and more themes. I mean, this is a unique crescendo of issues that, of course, are very well complemented by the work of the configurations. To Ambassador Lober, a dear friend and a tremendous leader, an inspirational figure, I can't thank him enough for this very, very, very close working relationship that he managed to establish with the whole office. Actually, you know, we sort of consider him to be part of our office in disguise. He's sort of a secret card-carrying member of PBSO of sorts. But no, to really thank you, Georg. We have really been very inspired by your determination at the most difficult moments, and we live through very difficult moments. You have been able to maintain what is key here, the unity of the key stakeholders, the national, the local, the regional, the international, you know, keep the UN focused and the member states. And it's your very inclusive way of working, very humble, very discreet, but very effective. And you actually motivated the Peace Building Fund to go way beyond the resources that we had originally planned. And I think this combination, yourself, Ambassador Shinjiro, and the teams of PBSO managed to actually put together quite an important support package that I'll quickly refer to later, but just really to thank you on behalf of all the colleagues of PBSO. You will be dearly missed. And I really like your idea of staging sort of a lessons learned retreat to see how we don't miss this opportunity to, again, support this very unique moment in the history of Burundi. Just very quickly, I think we have been highlighting this in many of the meetings, but we in the office and PBSO have been doing a huge effort to actually readapt a lot of the ongoing peace building funded projects and programs, particularly in the context of country-specific configurations. Again, trying to help the resident coordinators, the country teams be much more responsive, rapidly come in support of governments in their response to a COVID situation. And a lot of the response mechanism actually has included support to local peace initiatives that have become, you know, following some of the ceasefires that the Secretary General had called upon, ensuring that we have active inclusion and community engagement in the formulation of social protection mechanisms, supporting resident coordinators to better coordinate their efforts with the World Bank in terms of data analysis and framing the joint response, the UN, the international financial institutions and others. And again, always promoting inclusive dialogues and something that, as we see as time goes on, this criticality of supporting the strategic communications of governments to actually communicate what populations need to do to prevent. I think this is becoming, as we're seeing in many countries that are not taking sort of a very proactive role in addressing misinformation and countering the type of hate speech that we see, that it is vital to the protection of many citizens around the world, that, you know, factual scientific information be at the forefront of what governments are communicating. And this has become an important line of work. Very quickly, in Burundi, Jörg, as a result of your strong efforts, we have an ongoing $18 million program. I mean, a year or two ago, if anybody would have asked how much money PBF would have been thinking of investing here, certainly I don't think we would have come to this very high figure. And a lot of it has to do with empowering women mediators. We have seen how important this has been to prevent electoral violence, how important it has been to create an enabling environment for refugees to return from Tanzania and the neighboring countries, how important it has been to maintain political dialogue among opposition and other forces in the country. So just to pay special tribute, because thanks to you, Ambassador, this particular light being shown on what started as a very small pilot program, we have been able to grow. And as I speak, the resident coordinator just yesterday submitted a follow-up note for a program to strengthen women's leadership in women, peace, and security. Unfortunately, we are limited in terms of what we can do to respond to this initiative. We will be allocating or earmarking $1 million to this new initiative, but they are seeking $5 million as a global package. So again, this is the platform that we hope that the Peace Building Commission can make this relay between what country configurations are doing to the wider membership of the Peace Building Commission, because in this particular case, a successful program that will be crucial for the way forward in terms of building back better. This initiative, I think, has a very strong, how can I say, track record that now requires the full support of the membership. So again, this is a special plea, and I hope this can be done. In the Central Africa Republic, again, to thank Ambassador Omar Hilal, the many multiple meetings that have been had. Again, the Peace Building Fund was quite instrumental in jumpstarting the support to the peace agreement with some $20 million. And one of the most high-risk areas that very few ventured to support, which was the support to these mixed security units. The fund over the past 12 months has been training the first units of this mixed security units, and they are being deployed next week, actually to provide security and protection along the transhumance corridors between Chad and the Central African Republic. Equally important, over the past 2 weeks, we have been increasing the contribution to community violence reduction programs, which are a critical component to the DDR mandated task of the mission, and particularly the work we're supporting of IOM in Pawa and in Bambari have really exemplified how a community approach, working with local authorities and traditional leaders, focusing on the informal economy, if you will, is providing the strong momentum for an increased peace-building dynamic in the Central African Republic. In Guinea-Bissau, tomorrow, as the ambassador just said, we will be talking in more detail about the contributions of the different partners in support of this very important mission and the drawdown of the mission. So a lot of the work of the Peace Building Fund has been rapidly approving 2 projects over the past few months, amounting to some $4 million to support the transition from the mission to the country team, particularly as it relates to supporting political dialogue and inclusive institutional reforms that are linked to the Stability Pact outcome. And the second is to launch an innovative program to fight drug trafficking and organized crime. This we're doing with UNODC. It's taken quite a lot of months to actually formulate a peace-building angle to this type of work of UNODC in Guinea-Bissau. And again, Guinea-Bissau is one of the places where we have put quite a lot of support to fighting the spread of fake news. And certainly this is a situation that many times can lend itself to misinformation that can actually help propel this disease even further. So a lot of work with journalists, with media outlets, with the social media, doing fact-checking and immediately coming up with scientific data about how to protect citizens from COVID-19. In the case of Liberia, and the ambassador has just stated the multiple reaching outs that have happened, and we have been following very closely her own deliberations because we see in some of these discussions opportunity to see how the Peace Building Fund can actually support some of these new openings that are coming as a result of the multiple consultations that she described. Maybe of importance for this forum is that we are building on the second phase on a cross-border program between Liberia and Cote d'Ivoire. And again, promoting a very people-centered focus on COVID-19 response. These are countries that in the last Ebola outbreak actually came up with cross-border community prevention mechanisms that this program is now putting back into kicking this whole mechanism back into existence. And of course, lastly, but not least, in Sierra Leone, we continue to remain very engaged, despite the fact that the president, the government has announced their intention to graduate from this configuration mechanism. A lot of work focusing on resolving conflicts around land, around concessions, around this conflict between, or tensions between local authorities and some private companies, particularly engaged in large-scale mining and agricultural operations. So a lot of dialogue, conflict resolution mechanisms, involvement of women, young people, traditional elders in trying to mitigate the tensions that arise in these current situations. So just these, Mr. Chair, just was meant to be just a quick update in terms of how we are adapting our programming behind the leadership of the country-specific configurations, and to thank you for this opportunity to brief everyone again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Oscar. I'll now go to the member states. So I have Guillermo, and then Geraldine, and then Lazarus. So Guillermo, my predecessor, how are you?
My president, how are you? Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the country configuration chairs for today's briefing. Your commitment contributes to achieve PBC goals, as well as to improve the management and performance of each configuration. Functioning in the midst of this pandemic has been a major challenge. Peace-building priorities have somehow to be redefined to address effectively the COVID-19. For the PBC, it's important to advance in the work with the configurations. Burundi, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Central African Republic, and Sierra Leone continue facing important challenges. A common denominator in this is the lack of economic resources and the need of a more coordinated efforts among the stakeholders. We should promote a regional approach to ensure coherence and impact. It is essential to strengthening the relationship with current partners and to foster new alliances with international financial institutions, civil society, among others. These fulfill the purpose of overcoming the pandemic and reaffirming the peace-building priorities. The main organs of the United Nations are playing a very important role in this process. I recognize the extraordinary job and countless efforts from the ambassadors, your lover, Ronaldo Costa Filho, Anna Karina and Omar Hilali, as chairs of the configuration. The support of your government for the PBC has been invaluable. Ambassador Marc-André, as PBC chair, has demonstrated great leadership and engagement. We are grateful to you and with Canada. I also want to recognize today the work of the ambassador of Liberia, Burundi, Central African Republic, Guinea-Bissau, and Sierra Leone for the commitment with this commission. And today, I want to pay a special tribute to George, given that this is one of the last meetings in New York. I thank his personal commitment to Burundi, his countless travels, and attention given to the electoral cycle of 2020 and the economic situation on the refugee programs. I am certain that the PBC and the Burundian people will miss you, dear ambassador. Let me conclude reiterating that in Colombia, we are convinced that there is no sustainable development without peace, and peace without sustainable development. Thank you again for the briefing. Thank you for the configuration. And thank you, Marc-André, for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Guillermo. Thanks for your kind word, and thanks for everything you've done. Geraldine.
All right. Thank you, Marc-André. I'm afraid my iPad is slipping on it. It's held up on a box, so apologies. It just slipped off. It's good to see you all. Merci, cher Marc-André, for your chairmanship. I'm proud. I think Oscar used the term to be a card-carrying member of the PBC, and I have to say, proud under your leadership, Marc-André, to be a card-carrying member. I think the flexibility and the adaptable leadership you've shown that the Secretariat has supported in this COVID crisis has been really important in cementing the role of the PBC in the wider peace and security framework. And I wanted to thank, of course, every single country configuration chair who has spoken today. Each and every one of them basically brings the strength of their extraordinary work to the PBC proper. People will forgive me if I just single out, obviously, Jörg as he leaves us. I've had separate occasions to compliment Jörg, but I think what we heard from Jörg today, frankly, was a really powerful statement, and it's something that I would like to reflect on, Jörg, not just in relation to Burundi, but I think in relation to the remarks you made about the PBC. You know it better than I do, certainly. And I just wanted to say to you that we really appreciate you took the time to make what was such a powerful reflection. I think your legacy will be with us for a long time. So thank you very much. Marc-André, as chair, I think you've said before, but I think it's important listening to the speakers today that what we've been trying to do in this COVID context is to make sure that this context doesn't deflect us from what our basic function is here, which is really to consolidate the gains in peace building and in sustaining peace in different areas. And certainly my country's engagement with PBC will continue in that mode. You know, we think that we need to remain engaged with the chairs, of course, but with national governments and with the people on the ground. Just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think now, in Monrovia, our embassy brought together the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Special Rep of ECOWAS on peace, political and security implications of COVID, and the Mano River Union and the wider ECOWAS region. And I think that very important points emerged there in that just that one conversation that we've heard repeated again and again today, particularly in relation to the importance now in this context of agriculture and food security for peace building, but also wider issues that Anna Karen touched on in relation to Liberia. So I took Ronaldo's point at the beginning that one size doesn't fit all, and we do need to look at specific country instances. But before I finish, I want just to touch on 3 specific issues that I think I heard recurring in all of the remarks today. One is about partnerships, the other is electoral process, and then the third, certainly not last or least, in relation to women and youth. On partnerships, I mean, look, I think we've heard very clearly from every single speaker today that the work with host governments, UN country teams, and the IFIs, but I would also say the African Union and the European Union, are really key anchors to what we do here in specific country instances. So I would strongly encourage the chairs in this environment to keep those partnerships alive and really to invest in them. And I would ask, I know Anna Karen, you've had a virtual visit to the World Bank and IMF. We see that as a very important link, and I'm interested from the various chairs to see, how do you see the role of PBC members now individually supporting you going forward in those partnership relations? We think that the working on the ground, frankly, also with our own resident coordinators, as well as host governments, they're the people who have the real grasp of what reality is country by country on the ground. So just to, I know Oscar made this point about the keeping the lines of communication clearly open there, that really to us is more important than ever. A very important issue that I think if you look across all of the country configurations is clearly the support for the electoral processes. We've heard today Guinea-Bissau and Burundi in post-electoral environments, the Central African Republic and Liberia now preparing to hold important elections. When I was looking across the range of responsibilities here, we know that the region as a whole, for example, in ECOWAS, there are 6 countries this year that face into elections, with one border country, Cote d'Ivoire, also hosting elections. So the degree to which we can play a role in preventive diplomacy, looking at where there are maybe risks of border tensions, and the national COVID response obviously feeding into all of that. I think there's a whole complex of issues there that gives more than enough concern for the PBC. And I'd also like to highlight that the senatorial elections coming up in Liberia is an important moment, nationwide elections, the first ones since UNMIL has left. I hope that we can all work to support the Liberian government, looking at deciding on election dates, sufficient resources, communications, etc. They're all big challenges. And of course, frankly, the fact is we won't be able to deliver on them as PBC if we don't have the funding. And I would like to just signal now, I've heard you say it, Oscar, and no, Marc-Andre, it's often on your mind. We can make statements here in the PBC about supporting, for example, electoral process, but if we don't ensure they're adequately funded, how can we actually deliver on them? So I think we have to remind ourselves that we have an obligation as well as an aspiration in all of these. And then just to finish on my, always making the point about the critical role of women and youth. Without the meaningful participation of women right across every country configuration, we cannot realize what we're trying to do. It's a prerequisite for sustaining peace. So we've increasingly spoken again also about the involvement of youth. It's not a rhetorical device that we use here about engaging women and youth. So it shouldn't be a rhetorical reflex within the PBC either. And I'd be interested to see really what the chairs of each country configuration are doing, not just to talk about women and youth, but actually to engage with them and to engage specifically with them now in this post-COVID context. So that's just all by way of a reflection on an important morning where we've heard the extraordinary work for which we're deeply grateful for each country configuration. Thank you, Marc-Andre. Merci.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thanks for your kind word. And I agree with you with respect to women and girls. So, and the funding. So let's, thank you very much. I now go to Lazarus, and then I'll go to Ali, and then we'll go from to Liberia and Norway.
Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I join other delegations in thanking you, Chair Marc-Andre, for the leadership that you continue to provide, and all the country configuration chairs and distinguished representatives of the countries currently working with the PBC for their continued engagement and coordination despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic in our working methods. May I also join colleagues in paying tribute to our friend and our brother Loba for the great job he did in Burundi and his commitment and partnership with the government and the people of Burundi. And we wish you the best as you move to your next assignment back at home. I can also not forget to thank Fernandez Taranco and his team for the support that they always provide and the briefings they give us that are useful. We appreciate. Chair, I'll be brief. Looking ahead, mine is just to reiterate three aspects of the PBSO, the PBF, and we member states, what we should really remain and become more attentive to during the post-COVID-19 in the area of peace building in country and regional settings. First, on health, security, and governance infrastructure, the Ebola crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic are proved to have a significant impact on critical governance infrastructure, for example, on healthcare systems. Access to health facilities and sustainability of social cohesion are crucial elements in easing societal tensions during these challenges. Therefore, reinforcement of public and state institutions is one way of contributing to political stability and long-term peace-building efforts, including support to state capacity to mitigate against potential risks of to fragile and peaceful societies. Secondly, on funding, given the significant impact of COVID-19 on the global economy, the already strained financial situation of peace-building activities is looking at further funding shortfalls. The PBC is well positioned to ensure minimal setbacks to critical efforts aimed at food security, poverty eradication, and growth of domestic industries in the countries engaging with the Commission. Of importance is for the Commission to advise on how best to prioritize on the existing resources and explore cost-effective responses that are context-based. Last but not least, Chair, it is not too early to start strategizing on the next phase of political and social economic recovery and building resilience against future pandemics. The Commission will be integral in ensuring that international attention does not dwindle, particularly for fragile and conflict-affected countries. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lazarus, and thanks for your kind words, but also for your last words. I totally agree with you. There's a role for us, and we need to focus on that, on the post, the economic side of it, and the post-COVID. I mean, it's the more I look at the situation, I think everyone would agree that the deeper the economic situation will be, the economic recession will be so deep and so prolonged, and will affect the most vulnerable amongst us the most. And we need to, it's tough because anyway, it's part of another process that we have at the UN at the moment, but we need to put a lot of energy towards that. And I think it's an opportunity for the UN. So I thank you for that. So Ali from Sierra Leone, Pastor Kaba, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm right here. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, the Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me thank Ambassador Blanchard for his remarks on the exit of Sierra Leone from the formal agenda of the PBC. We fully subscribe to the content of his remarks and would once again thank him and Canada for their stewardship of the PBC Sierra Leone country configuration over the years. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the PBSO, especially ASG Taranko, for their accompaniment and support to the peace-building configuration of Sierra Leone over the years. Withdrawing from the formal agenda of the PBC was not a decision taken lightly by the government of His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio. It is based on the tremendous progress Sierra Leone has made since the end of the Civil War in 2002. We have had 4 presidential and parliamentary elections between 2002 and 2018, with an opposition party winning twice during that period. We have built institutions such as the Human Rights Commission, which has helped to secure our democracy and peace. In addition, we have invested in human capital development and infrastructure to ensure continuous and sustainable development. Thus, exiting the formal agenda of the PBC was the natural progress of things. And in many ways, it reflects the tremendous contribution of the PBC to the political, economic, and social evolution of our country. Sierra Leone will continue, nonetheless, to engage with the PBC as and when the need arises. In view of this, we are fully supportive of having a roadmap of engagement with the PBC post-exit. The roadmap should focus on outstanding issues in the 2 peace-building assessment reports, the report of the visit of the chair of the PBC Sierra Leone configuration in December 2017, and the report of the PBC configuration meeting in January 2019. The principles of the roadmap would include the fact that Sierra Leone has always been in the driving seat of its peace-building journey and will continue to be in the driving seat. In addition, engagement with the PBC will mainly be geared towards promoting peace and national cohesion. In this regard, support for the setting up and sustenance of the Commission of Peace and National Cohesion should be a priority. The report on the National Dialogue on Democratic Consolidation for Peace and National Cohesion, held in Sierra Leone in May 2019, should serve as a reference point. Furthermore, the PBC can convene meetings around implementing the key priorities in the National Development Plan of Sierra Leone. An ambassadorial level of the PBC should be convened to discuss the above mentioned issues, and it can be followed by a meeting where international financial institutions, donors, and other UN agencies can make commitment to support Sierra Leone technically and fiscally in the following 3 areas: human capital development, economic diversification, institutional resilience, and governance. Let me also say that addressing the long-term socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in the context of debt relief can also be used as a discussion point in any future PBC Sierra Leone engagement. And on that note, I want to thank the mission of Canada, especially the expert, Marc-Andre. I have to really recognize Vanessa, working closely with my expert, Alan George, over the years, to make sure that this peace building journey together is fruitful. No, it's a lot of back-end work, but this is an opportunity for me to lift them up, for all of us to recognize that having great experts in our missions help a lot. They keep the light on when everything around us seems sometimes to be so impossible to achieve. Je vous remercie infiniment, mon frère.
Thank you, and I can attest to the work done by Alan and Vanessa, the great work. So thanks to both of them. So now I'll go to our friend, the Deputy Permanent Representatives of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Excellencies, and greetings to everyone. I take the floor on behalf of my ambassador, D. Maxasa Kemia, Senior, who is currently in another meeting and has expressed his regrets for missing out on this meeting, which is also of immense relevance. I wish to thank the ASG Tarango for his usual commendable contribution, and to all the briefers for the enlightenment on the activities of country-specific configurations. A special gratitude to Ambassador Anna Karen Enderstrom, Chair of Liberia's configuration, for her clear and spot-on update on Liberia. We're very satisfied that like our previous chair, Ambassador Enderstrom, remains robustly engaged with a cross-section of actors collaborating in the best interest of Liberia, the likes of the IMF and the World Bank. Beyond this, as you did hear from Ambassador Enderstrom, she has had very productive discussions with authorities of the Liberian government and with the hope of being acquainted with challenges and prospects of Liberia to explore pathways in addressing these building priorities in Liberia. Here, I would like to also flag the continual laudable engagement we enjoy with Matilda Homer of the Swedish Mission and colleagues of the PBSO, Chelsea Payne, Paulo Fontana, and etc. Working with these individuals is an inspiration. We are never out of information that relates to the activities of our configuration. We acknowledge and appreciate the kind intervention of Ambassador Geraldine Nason on very critical matters pending in Liberia. Having said this, we remain very concerned about the spread of COVID-19 in Liberia. As you have heard, the Liberian president has extended a state of emergency over the COVID-19 pandemic by 30 days, which commenced yesterday, due to the spread of the virus. The government of Liberia will look to reinforcing the wearing of face masks and the stay-at-home order, both of which we find challenging to effect. We believe that increased collaboration with the international partners in responding to COVID-19 will prove rewarding as we work towards mitigating economic challenges in our country. We are aware that in all of these, Liberia and Liberians need to uphold our own part of the bargain. We are aware that the challenges we have cannot be addressed by Liberians alone. So we can promise you that we will remain committed to the processes that engender peace and promote economic development. I trust we will continue to do our part as we also look forward to the future with optimism. In closing, let me once again thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening this very important meeting, and to Ambassador Enderstrom, we look forward to the outcome of your engagement with the civil society. Thanks and farewell to Ambassador Lubber. Wish you well in your new preferment. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the representative of Norway. Terje, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to all the chairs of the country configurations. Norway is very impressed with everything achieved during a pandemic, and of course in close cooperation with the countries in question. It is really all about which results the configurations manage to yield when it comes to supporting the national authorities. I'll be brief and just want to underline the importance of the PBC's relations with partners and other organs. Much of this is carried out by the country configurations, including contributing to fulfilling the PBC's important advisory role. We're grateful for the excellent updates on the configurations work with Guinea-Bissau, Central African Republic, Liberia, Burundi, and Sierra Leone. Support to counter the socio-economic effects of COVID-19 is crucial. Thanks to the configurations and states for highlighting their efforts as to women and youth. Finally, if I may, special greetings to Ambassador Jörg Lauber. Congratulations with all your achievements, and we wish you all the best in Geneva. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you for your engagement. And I now go and give the floor to Ambassador, sorry. I wanted to give you a promotion from the representative of Japan, so Mr. Hiroyuki.
Thank you, Chair. I am actually an ambassador. We have 4 ambassadors, and I'm not a PR or.
I'm so sorry for my ignorance. So thank you, Ambassador. Welcome. You deserve it, and my apologies.
The Permanent Mission of Japan would like to express our deep gratitude to Ambassador Lauber for your engagement towards the PBC. For the past 5 years, we have been inspired by your dedication through meetings of the configuration and your Burundi visit, as many as 10. Japan believes your efforts have embodied the key role a PBC configuration can play. We also welcome the active involvement of all the chairs of the country-specific configurations during this challenging time. The COVID-19 pandemic has multi-dimensional impacts, and these could hit especially hard in conflict-affected countries. We commend that the Central African Republic configuration and Liberia configuration convened meetings to focus on COVID-19 effects on these countries. We're pleased that the chairs of the country-specific configurations continue to provide timely inputs to the Security Council. Such engagement is helpful to strengthen the PBC's advisory role to the Security Council. We hope that this continues. Country-specific configurations play a very important role in support of countries in transition to build and sustain peace. While we support thematic discussions at the PBC, Japan at the same time continues to support the work of the country-specific configurations. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador Hiroyuki. And my apologies again. I'll never do that again, so my apologies. So now it's I don't know if any of the chairs of the peace building configuration want to make a final comment in less than 60 seconds before we close, or you're all done. I'll just look at each and every one of you that are still there. Ronaldo, you're fine. Jörg and Anna Karen, I presume you're okay because I don't see you anymore. And then Omar, am I missing one? No. So all fine. So I'd like just to take briefly this opportunity to update you on the informal phase of the 2020 Peace Building Architecture Review. So we've held 4 thematic consultations open to all UN member states under the informal phase of the 2020 review. So, 3 of these consultations had to be held virtually, and I thank all of the countries who contributed statements to these consultations, and the last of which closed last week. On the basis of these thematic consultation and as mandated by the terms of reference for the review, we have prepared a draft letter from the Peace Building Commission to the Secretary General and Presidents of the General Assembly and Security Council, summarizing the areas of progress remaining and as well as the remaining challenges and recommendations that emerged from these statements. And the letter was circulated for comments last week and will be revised on the basis of the feedback we've received. And it will be circulated under the silence procedure. And so we seek your cooperation, your continued cooperation, should I say, of all peace building, of all of you, the members of the Peace Building Commission, in helping to ensure that we have a substantive and balanced letter agreed at the end of this month, reflecting the views of member states on progress in implementing the 2016 resolution. So the final letter will be sent to the Secretary General, the PGA, and the President of the Council on June 30th as an input into the forthcoming SG's reports and the formal phase of the review. So I thank you very much, because I think a lot of good things went into that review, and there was some good participation and good statements made. So we need to build on this. And I think, as we've seen, the role of the Peace Building Commission is really evolving on the great work that has been done throughout the years. So we need to build, I think it has changed quite a lot from 2016 to now. So we need to make sure that we reflect that and that it's reflected in the review. So I thank you all for that. So this would be everything I have to say for today. So Oscar, we're all fine. We can close. We can close. Okay. So well, I thank each and every one of you for your participation, and thanks for the briefers for your briefing, but more so for the extraordinary work you're all doing. Really, it's impressive, the level of engagement by each of the chairs of the the configuration. So thank you and congratulations for all of the work, and thanks for the countries that are around this table to engage on this very important issue. It's exciting for all of us. So thanks. Have a good day. Thank you.
Merci. Bon voyage, Jörg. Bonne chance.
Yes, Jörg, we'll miss you. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Bye-bye. Thank you.